Hello and welcome, everyone. We will be kicking off with the Adobe Design panel, Portfolio Journeys, in just a few seconds. We'll just give folks a chance to join us here in the Zoom room or to follow along on the live stream, and then we'll kick things off. All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to an Adobe Design panel, Portfolio Journeys. This is part of AIGA's 2021 Portfolio Festival. Compared to other professions, the portfolio is a uniquely creative item. And as designers, as we carry our portfolios through our creative careers, they shape themselves into records of our creative journeys in motion. By the way, my name is Lishan Huang. If you haven't met me before, I'm here with AIGA. Today's session, we will be speaking with members of Adobe Design's team for a panel discussion followed by Q&A with your questions, where we'll learn about the creative journeys that have led our panelists and the ways that their portfolios have served them along the way. A bit about Adobe Design. Adobe Design is a global team of designers, researchers, prototypers, content strategists, program managers, and more. They work across Adobe's 3 product lines: Creative Cloud, Document Cloud, and Experience Cloud. The team designs the tools and services that Adobe Design customers use to create and communicate. So just a few logistical housekeeping issues before I hand it off to our guest speakers today. Feel free to use the chat here on Zoom or the comment section if you're watching the live stream to say hello, briefly introduce yourself, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if you're here on Zoom, please use the Q&A tab at the bottom of your Zoom screen. That will help us keep track of your questions there. And if your window is minimized or it's small, you can click on the 3 dots that say more to find that Q&A tab. If you're watching the live stream, just post in the comments. We are monitoring questions there and we'll surface them time permitting as well. And just a final friendly reminder about our code of conduct, which governs all AIGA events. Remember that we want to keep things friendly and harassment-free, so no harassment or abuse, or we have to kick you off the session. Besides that, looking forward to this panel discussion. So I'll hand it over to Archie Bagnall from Adobe Design, who will introduce the other panelists.
Amazing. Thank you, Lishan, and thank you to everyone who's been able to join us today. It's great to have you with us. And I know this is kind of the first day of this year's Portfolio Festival. So if this is the very first session that you're joining of a few you're intending to join in with, thank you for taking the time to come sit with us. And we'll introduce all of us and our amazing panel shortly. But first, we'll just talk a little bit about the format of the discussion. Zooms and webinars are places where lots of screen sharing can happen. And especially for something like a portfolio festival, this week is an opportunity to see lots of work, lots of portfolios, and to see tons of practical pointers and tips that you can then take back into your own portfolios. And as this session is right at the start of the festival, instead of diving straight into tips and tricks, what we wanted to do was use this time to actually zoom out a little bit and set context and maybe think about the roles our portfolios can actually play in our professional creative journeys. Our portfolios have this amazing characteristic of sort of following us through our creative journeys and our creative careers. And so also kind of exist as this living document that maybe says something about who we might be as creatives and actually what kind of work that we do. So that's really what this discussion is going to be all about. We're 4 designers from Adobe Design, which is Adobe's internal design team. Lishan already said some amazing things about this global team of incredibly talented people covering a wide range of disciplines, all working to support Adobe's products and various clouds. And specifically today, we'll probably be focusing on Creative Cloud if we talk about products at all. And we're actually going to use most of our time today to have a panel discussion, as Lishan said, where we'll be discussing the ways our portfolios have kind of been alongside us in our creative professional journeys. And then we'll move into a time of Q&A, hopefully for about 10 to 15 minutes. So feel free throughout the discussion to just use the chat pod as a place to put your questions. And then when we get to them at the end, certain questions will be pulled out and we'll use those in the time. I'll say as well now, because I will definitely forget at the end, but we're also going to be leading an office hours session tomorrow. So if your question doesn't get answered and you want to come and say hi and we can chat face to face and you want to ask your question there, please come and join that session. And I want to say that the time is posted somewhere alongside the event description that you probably found when you signed up for this. So with that, why don't we kick off and meet our amazing panel. And so maybe our first question is just simply to introduce all of ourselves rather than me try and put words in people's mouths and introduce them on their behalf. And so team, as we go around the group, maybe if we could just say our name, the role and current team that we're on in Adobe Design, and maybe how long you've been part of Adobe Design. And then also roughly maybe how many years you've considered yourself a creative professional. So I'll kick off. My name is Archie Bagnall. I'm a senior experience designer at Adobe Design. I'm on Adobe's machine intelligence design team. And I joined Adobe back in 2018. And then probably the first time I ever did a piece of design work that I got paid for and said, I am a designer, was probably around 2007, 2008. And so why don't we now jump to Emma and let's meet Emma.
Hi, everyone. My name is Emma John. I'm the senior brand designer at Adobe Design. I'm on the brand team. So if you see those icons, this splash screen, that's from my team. I've been at Adobe for more than 5 years now, which is quite a journey. So I joined Adobe at 2016 that summer, I think. Yeah. So with that, I will pass it to Jocelyn, my team member.
Awesome, thanks, Emma. Hi, everyone. My name is Jocelyn Reid. I am a senior experience designer on the brand team, and I've been with Adobe now for 5 months. So I'm still pretty fresh. I've been doing art all my life, but I've been focusing specifically on visual communication since the late 90s.
Cool. And last but not least, hi everyone, I'm Dipali Bajaj and I'm on the Learn team. I work a lot with students, teachers, instructors to better learn our creative tools. I've been at Adobe now about 3 years. I came here right out of college, and it's been a spectacle so far. I think I would consider myself a creative professional since the age of 12. I was that kid that carried a camera around everywhere and was kind of constantly snapping photos of everything and everyone. Yeah, nice to meet you all.
Absolutely. And maybe Dipali, you describing that is a great lead into our first question for actually the whole group, which is, I'm sure you all have memories still of the first time you assembled something that you considered was your portfolio with kind of big sort of, quotes around it. I'd love to hear where you were all at in your creative journeys when that first portfolio came together. Had you been in school? Was it something that you'd been pursuing personally? And just, tell us about exactly kind of where you were at when you then sat down to make this thing that you were like, this is my portfolio. Dipali, maybe you mentioning all the photography you were doing is a good cue for me to call on you first. I don't know if that was the first moment and you put all your photos somewhere, or if there was a time a little bit later where the first portfolio happened for you.
Yeah, I can go. All of those photos used to end up on this Tumblr page that I had back in the day that was kind of a secret because I was kind of shy about all the photos I used to take, and I would just kind of post them for myself. But a real portfolio moment was really when I was applying to art school and I had to put together this portfolio that at the time was both like physical and digital. I was the kid that took photos, but I also used to code a lot. And then I made all of these like softwares for my dad's printing business so that he could automate some of his stuff. And that was part of my portfolio. I also had a bunch of paintings that were charcoal, mixed media. And like putting all of that stuff together, had this gigantic black folder that had like huge paintings in it. And sending it out to art schools was really that first moment where all of those different materials came together.
Amazing. And Jocelyn, I know you said you've really been doing creative work since kind of around the 90s. So I'm curious what that first moment was for you.
Awesome. Yeah. So my portfolio, my very first portfolio was it was important for me to show work that spans from handmade stuff to a digital experience. And back then, the digital experience is what was trending at the time was a self-contained experience on a CD-ROM, which I took full advantage of. And yes, it was more of a tactile format, especially when compared to our current digital first world. So this created a new opportunity because you can always leave a piece of your work with the interviewer, and also the opportunity also presents itself for you to create a nice package. So you did like a package design and brand the entire experience, which showcase your range of skill sets. So.
Yeah, I mean, do you still have access to a CD drive where you can revisit the disc?
No, unfortunately not. That period has left us, but honestly, I really miss the overall process of creating a physical experience. I found it very gratifying because you can physically hold the product that you just created. So yeah, I miss that aspect of a more tactile experience.
Love it. Emma, how about you?
Just, I still remember the sound of like, actually, you have to burn. Is that the term? Like you have to burn that thing on the CD-ROM. Anyway, so it was a really fun time. Yeah, well, for me, it's a little bit different because both of my parents are graphic designers. So we have like a studio, and they were running their studio business back then, trying to be an independent designers. And later on, they found life is pretty hard with the kids. So they were just like, yeah, we will become a professor. But yeah, I think I started to, I can't even remember like the first piece I made and I included in my portfolio, but I do remember, yeah, like applying to art school, I have to put together a physical, like a book. You know, have to show them that you know how to bind a book, and not glue everywhere, and like put your artwork glued there. It's really fun. I mean, it's early 2000, so you can imagine. Yeah, but I think what's missing right now is the physical experience of portfolio, but also I think it's very convenient. You can just have a PDF and share with anybody like in a second. It's more efficient. So, well, yeah, that's my first experience with portfolio.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Well, and actually in that we've started to already kind of clue around kind of the physical formats that our portfolios took, and this idea of like kind of the things that you were using the portfolio for kind of maybe shaped the specific formats that it took. And so Jocelyn, it sounded like you were really putting together this physical kind of product experience, but there were also some digital elements involved and things like that. And, you know, graphic design work can so often lead to things that exist in a very physical way. You know, your work that can end up on physical items in the world, but then also you mentioned, you know, digital work where things that might live on the web and digitally. And Emma, you were mentioning even portfolios that kind of just live digitally today versus the times where maybe an emphasis on physical portfolios was a really, really prescient thing. Jocelyn, I'm really curious if, one, I just want to hear more about this amazing portfolio package that you put together, but knowing that you were maybe putting something together very intentionally that was going to be showcasing both physical and digital work, this idea of having some kind of leave behind. I'd love to hear more about the ways that that idea of experience shaped some of the choices you made in how you chose to show the work. And you are on mute. First of many.
Right. So I knew I wanted to get in at the advertising industry, and that was in the back of my mind. And even though I started out really experienced, I was very intentional with how I positioned the work that I included into my portfolio. The different mediums, the different I would say formats create new opportunity because I wanted to touch on different skill sets. I wanted to show that I I can do packaging design. I wanted to show that I can do illustration. And at the time, you're eager to put more of yourself into the work without being very mindful of editing. Simplify to clarify. That's something that through experience you learn along the way. So I wanted to just put it all in, and the different formats presented these opportunities because you can physically create a package by hand and then talk through the process of creating that with the interviewer, which was always create a really good icebreaker, and they can take it up and inspect it really closely to see how good you are with your hand skills, which at the time back in the day was a huge asset. The ability to work really well without the computer, and slowly the digital cat caught up and then has surpassed it. But back then it was more about what you can do without a computer.
Well, and Emma, I know you mentioned putting together a portfolio in order to apply to school, and I imagine applying to school was an in-person interview, having maybe a physical thing or a moment where you sit down and walk someone through the work, or maybe it was just part of an application where you sent something in and you didn't get to be in the room when somebody was looking through it. Tell us more about what the specific format of that application portfolio was like and what role it played in that application process.
Yeah, I think I live, sorry, Joss, I didn't mean to drag you, but I think we lived in an era when there's like, like everything has to be printed. Like the school is like, yeah, you have this, you have to print it. I was like, can we just send the original like sketch or whatever? No, like you have to print it and label in a certain way. It was kind of strange. They have like a certain format, and then you also have to submit a CD-ROM. Yeah, well, I think what's fun about that experience is that you got to there's a lot of things they can see not only just on in your artwork and the way how you package yourself and the way how you present your work, because you can be creative, like the way how they fold, and like you can do some interesting binding and add some flyers there. But yeah, that was the fun part. And also I remember back then, if you design a poster, you really have to print the poster, put it on the wall, and like ask your friend to walk around and take a photo, and hoping you can get this perfect blurry figure. And right now it's like all template, which is great. Yeah, I think like and also, I mean, I personally believe that you can sense that person's energy like through how they put together their physical portfolio, and you can tell like what type of creative they are. Some people are their artworks are amazing, but the way how they organize their portfolio is not like it could be a bit chaotic, but some people are like have very good system and in terms of how to present their work. So yeah, that's really interesting era, I would say. Kind of miss it, but not really. I was like, if I have to spend 4 days on this, maybe not. But yeah, it was a really fun time.
Amazing. And Dipali, I know your portfolio was first for an application to school. Was there, and you even described like lots of different kinds of work that you had been doing, whether it was your photography work or painting work that you'd been doing, or code that you'd been doing to support your dad's printing business, or other endeavors that you had been pursuing. So tell us about I imagine in that moment you're confronted with Jocelyn mentioned this, simplify to clarify. And so you're faced with this moment where you have tons of different work, lots of different types of mediums and disciplines being explored. How did you navigate having so much stuff that you maybe wanted to show, knowing that it was for an application and that maybe certain things would be more relevant, less relevant, but also wanting to, as Emma was just describing, kind of show you at the same time? Tell us a little bit about that sort of dilemma in experience.
Yeah, for sure. When I think about portfolios, essentially there's like the portfolio where you're trying to showcase yourself, and then there's a portfolio that you're trying to, you want to get hired, this is the portfolio that's going to get you hired. And I experienced this like dilemma twice. Once when I was applying for university, and then also when I was applying for jobs when I was in college, because just as a person, I've always been interested in different mediums and different formats, and I sort of took that experience with me into college as well. I think when applying for schools, like I think I went like the poly then was graduating high school, and in my head I thought that it was quantity over quality. I just wanted to show everything. I wanted to be like, here's everything I can do, look at me. And then when I was graduating, it was almost the opposite. I was like trying to focus my even though I had a lot of projects, there's like this battle. You want to show who you are, but you also want to present yourself in a way that you're thinking about who's going to be looking at this portfolio. And you're trying to balance this like self-expression with utility. And I think that's kind of the hardest part. And that balance actually looks different for everybody. And so I think I just thought a lot about who I was as a person. So for example, I tried to present fewer projects, but I also kept the projects that said a lot about me. So for example, there was this video that I made in one of my motion media classes. And I felt like that video was so essential to my being and to my identity that without it, my portfolio would just be incomplete. Even though I was applying for like a product designer role, I wanted to keep that little video because it was me, it was who I am. And yeah, I think that thinking about who you are, but also thinking about who's looking at this at the end of the day, and finding that balance for yourself and knowing that it's okay. Yeah.
Well, and it's almost sort of putting a user-centered or user experience lens on your portfolio, knowing that you're making something that in many ways can feel like it's for you when you're making it, but actually is for the person who's going to be looking at it. And Jocelyn, I know as you were trying to get into the advertising world, that's obviously something you were really thinking about. I'd love to hear about maybe that first job in the advertising world that you got, where you went in and you sat down and you had this physical amazing thing that you'd made, and there was a disc and you could leave it behind. Like, tell us about that meeting and what was the format of that meeting and how did it lead to that first job for you?
Here we go again. Okay, so it was very interesting. My very first job out of school, a real job, is in advertising, but I got a bit of I would say a bump, because the application for the job, I saw the job in the newspaper, and the job required the applicant to redesign the ad. So I got a bit of bump because I redesigned the ad, sent it in, they liked it, and then when I went in, it was a lot easier because they already know that I kind of know a thing or two. And of course, when I presented my actual physical portfolio case, that they were impressed by that, and also the packaging with my CD-ROM, my showreel, that was an added bonus that I used to, I would say, icing on the cake of the process. That's always something that helped, I would say, to I guess woo my potential employer. So it was a bit, I would say, I got lucky with designing the ad. I kind of showed what I could do before the actual interview itself. So when I went in, it was a lot smoother. And of course, my portfolio itself, how I, even though I was inexperienced, as I mentioned before, I was very strategic in highlighting the skill sets that the industry required, which is design, illustration, photography. That trifecta definitely gives you an advantage, especially coming from a small market like Jamaica, where there are a lot of smaller agencies, and with smaller agencies, you have smaller budgets. So you have to be a bit more resourceful. So the more you can do, the more marketable you are in that smaller market. So, yeah.
Well, and that can often also be a second trifecta that you're facing when assembling that portfolio, in terms of, are you interested in freelance work or agency work or even in-house work? Though I think it's fair to say that the lines between those three categories can be blurry at times. I'm curious if you had, like, knowing that you wanted to be in agency spaces, Did that shape the ways that you chose to show the work in terms of, was there lots of process? Was it only really polished, finished things? Obviously, you've described the sort of physical format of the portfolio and having a disc, and you mentioned a reel. But I'm curious in terms of like actually showing the projects themselves. Was there a certain thing you emphasized because you knew you wanted to pursue agency?
So I knew I wanted to be in the creative field, around creative people, doing creative things. And at that point in my life, advertising was the obvious choice. I chose the advertising industry because it allowed me to work and build on the skill sets that I truly love. It helped me to build the muscle of design, illustration, photography. And these are things that I've always been passionate about, but I'm going to get paid to do what you're passionate about. So in my mind, it didn't feel as if it's work. I created my portfolio to underscore those main skill sets. And, you know, the industry, I would say I perfected and I built on that, and I learned the principles that will help me to understand context and the relevance and teach me how better to utilize these skill sets and solve problems. It's until I went into the industry, I realized that design is a problem solving tool. Mm-hmm. And each of these skill sets can be used as a tools to solve problems also, you know.
No, definitely, absolutely, and that really resonates. And I'm wondering, Emma and Dipali, maybe this is for both of you, whether you're applying for internships or even that initial application to school, because I know that both of you experienced internships as you were coming out of school and even finishing school. Was there a certain emphasis on process and design as problem solving and unpacking a problem and things like that? And how did you therefore choose to kind of unpack that in portfolios and the ways you talked about your work in your portfolios? And maybe we'll start with Emma.
Yeah. So actually, what I did is like I make all my projects. So the way how I organize my portfolio is modular. So I have all those projects I want to show, and I also I design a layout and everything. But I will organize them in a different way when I talk to different people. When I was in school, I want to apply for all those independent studio. They will get a version of that. And when I apply to Adobe, they see a different one. Mainly I just reorganize them. It's not like there are dramatic difference in numbers of projects included, but I really just trying to read through their hiring post and see what they're emphasized on, and also pay attention to some of the bonuses that they're looking for, and maybe add that in the end, or like everybody was talking about, some projects they feel like it's just you. I will add it to the end, or maybe mention briefly in the interview or in the phone interview, and just say, hey, also I really want to share this with you because I've been working on this, and just introduce the background and my thoughts and concept. I think it really represent me as a creative, yada yada yada. But yeah, I definitely I at least have 2 or 3 portfolios. If I think at the time when I was looking for a job, yeah, I submit different types of portfolios to different people. But it doesn't mean you have to do it 3 times. You just have to have them made separately, and then when you organize the PDF, you can just kind of reorganize them in a way that you need.
Dipali, was that similar for you?
Yeah, what Emma's saying is making me think that there's this portfolio that lives on the web that you see when you're applying for a job, but then there's also the portfolio that usually people don't get to see, which is the deck, the PDF. Those are very personal things that only you and the employer see. I don't think I've seen a lot of people's portfolios. And I had the similar experience where you sort of I put together just, I actually did 2 internships when I was in school, one at Ancestry and one at IDEO. And for both of those interviews, it was a very spontaneous thing on the spot where I only had 10 minutes. And I had found out for the IDEO interview the day before. And honestly, in that moment, it was just so I put together this small little mini deck, which was just filled with personality. Just because I was like, they're going to be talking to so many people at this career fair, at this interview, and I just needed them to remember who I was as a person. And then I sent a follow-up with just the same projects, but more detail. And actually, I think you mentioned a little bit about process, which I just want to touch on. As an experience designer, a lot of the work that you do is not necessarily about the mockups. It's about the story, the ups, the downs, the middle. And something that I learned and has worked well for me is sharing what you learned, and because sharing what you learned rather than like what it is that you did. Like, for example, talking about interviews that you conducted, but tell me about like what you learned from those interviews. How did that impact your project? How did that steer the direction of where you're trying to go? Because as a young designer, I think that a lot of companies it's hard to show work because you don't necessarily have experience. So what they're judging you for, I think, has been just potential and passion, and trying to understand how your mind works and how you would approach a problem. So sharing your thinking, but rather in terms of the tools that you use, but in terms of the things that you learned from the tools that you used, has worked really well for me.
Well, and so much of that process of even figuring that out for yourself is so often sort of found as you do the work. And so I know we've emphasized a big portion of our discussion so far on kind of first portfolios and the early stages where we were emerging designers, but I'd love to hear about the fact, that the people often say that, the paint of your portfolio is just permanently wet. You're always making changes. And Emma, you even described a system of approaching a portfolio where just the whole thing is kind of a living organism that you're constantly reshuffling and reshaping. And so I'd love to hear from all of you, but maybe we'll start with Jocelyn. If there were any really key moments in your creative journey that really there was a very intentional, I'm hitting kind of a reset or a refresh on my portfolio. I know for me, arriving in the US from England was this real moment of sort of, I kind of get to sort of restate who I am as a designer and a creative, and the types of problems I'm really passionate about solving and what kinds of spaces I want to do that in. And that being a really valuable experience and moment for me. So Jocelyn, tell us about that for you.
Sure. So I revamped my portfolio after making the switch from advertising to the tech sector. And for this to work, I had to approach my portfolio in the same way that I would approach any creative challenge. First, I start with three main questions. Identify what this is, and who's it for, and why should they care? And when I unpack these three questions, things started to become much clearer in how I should position it and the work I should include within my portfolio.
And Emma, I know that during your creative journey and knowing some of the work that you do today at Adobe, that's amazing. You have more of an emphasis on illustration work now alongside a lot of the graphic design work that you do that you didn't necessarily have right at the start. And so tell us about the arrival of illustration and maybe how that informed some of the ways that you made changes or updates to your portfolio.
Yeah, it's really funny. Like I was trying to, as a graphic designer, went to graduate school and learning graphic design, and then I landed at Adobe. I started to draw illustrations. I was like, yeah, it's really interesting when the big proportion of your work just all of a sudden changed because the nature of your work, or something has changed, or you can just change as a creative. Like all of a sudden you feel like another discipline just more interested to me. I want to show more about that. And that's when I had like a really big I really just have to redo everything. Not saying I'm actively looking for a job, but it's just like it's the old portfolio. It's not me, because the old one is like all about graphic design, but I have this big proportion. I want, like creative works I've been working on, I want to show. So yeah, I think I would say like when a part of the work and starting to create it, like, you know, like become bigger and bigger, I just feel like, okay, this is the time. But also I feel like every 2 or 3 years, I wouldn't say like every year, because, you know, if you haven't changed a job, like you don't have to do it, but every 2 or 3 years, you will have new stuff. And I feel like that will be like the moment for you to update your portfolio. And also, before we all forget about this, I want to echo Dipoli's comment about passion for, you know, like upcoming designers and, you know, when we were students. I personally think the reason why I got a job, because I showed I care, like, about everything, every details, and I care about the job I'm applying for, and I care about the project I was doing. I was like so passionate. I was like talking about everything and anything, and yeah, like it showed that you're passionate. It's really gonna help you to stand out, because like there's so many creative, like also very great designers in my program, but I think like the thing really helps you is your personality, and that the energy that you radiating while you're in an interview or talked about your projects. You show people that like you've been through all those steps and you really care about this and you spend time on it, and you know, that I think that's something that will create impression for the interviewers. So yeah.
Well, yeah, I think something everyone's touched on in the panel is this sense of a portfolio being almost a self-awareness exercise, and knowing who you are in order to know what kind of work you want to include, how you want to talk about the work, how you want to even prioritize the work, and even how that can kind of inform the dialogue with yourself around what kind of jobs do I want to apply for, what kinds of projects do I want to pursue in the future, and then even which kind of projects do I want to, is it just time to sunset and pull out of the portfolio? And as we sort of keep going in this journey and just keeping an eye on time, I know here we all are at Adobe Design, and I'd love to hear how, as you kind of lived with your portfolio and you were on your creative journeys, I'd love to hear from each of you, like when you first heard about Adobe Design and saw that there was a job and you applied for it. And do not feel you have to give the really long story version of that. I'm just curious whether it was I saw a job description online, or I met someone, or I had a friend that worked there, or something like that. And maybe we'll start with Dipali.
Mine's actually a really funny and happy accident coming into Adobe Design. And essentially, back in college, and I'm sure all the students here can attest to this, that applying for jobs is honestly a full-time job in itself. And so my professor had actually, his target for me was that I would apply for 5 jobs a day. And you know, that's a little crazy, but one of the days I was sitting on LinkedIn and like I hit ease apply on so many different roles. I don't even know what I hit ease apply on. And then one day I like got a call from a recruiter at Adobe. She's like, "Hi, hello, Dipali." And I was like, "Hello." And she's like, "Well, just wanted to let you know that, you know, you applied for a senior designer position at Adobe and you're not really qualified." And I was like, "Okay, perfect. That's great. Thank you so much." And then she puts the phone down. 2 weeks later, I get a call back again saying, "Hey, Dipali, it's the recruiter again. Just wanted to let you know that I really loved your portfolio and the way that you talked about your work. And I've convinced the team to talk to you, and we're thinking about hiring a junior designer." So essentially, I got hired for a position that I wasn't supposed to get hired for. And so, yeah, that's kind of how I ended up here. Pretty unexpected and a happy accident.
That is the first time I've heard that story, and that is amazing. Jocelyn, how about you?
Mine is way less interesting than that. So I saw the post and I applied for it, and you know, things sort of like worked out in that direction. But my I would say that Adobe and myself, I've been using the product for well over 2 decades. So I've been living in the ecosystem of Adobe throughout my entire career. So I'm very familiar with the Adobe ways and how, you know, from a customer side of things. But I stumbled upon the Adobe Design team upon seeing the job posting actually, and my love for Adobe and the I would say my use of the product itself prompted me to apply for the position. So yeah, that's how I got in. I just applied, and the rest is history.
Yeah. And we'll say it again at the end, but if you go to adobe.design and scroll down, you will find all of our current open job listings if you want to see, and there are tons right now. So go and check them out. Emma, how about you?
I will try to make my story as interesting as Deepali's. I don't think it's on the same. Yours is just amazing. Yeah, I think in 2015, oh, hello.
We may have lost Emma, but Emma's
sorry.
back.
Okay.
Welcome back.
Sorry guys. So see, my camera is judging, like, don't try to make it more interesting than hers, because yours is not. But it was just, yeah, I interned at the brand team, but the job I was going to do was rebrand Adobe Design. That's how I learned the org. I was like, wait, what? Adobe Design? Okay. Well, I remember at the time, Sean Cheris was the manager of the brand team. So he was really busy. So he's kind of like procrastinate about like hiring an intern until the very end. They were like, Sean, you just got to pick somebody. And he's like, okay. So he just, I remember he called me. He's like, I really need to pick somebody. Like, do you want to join us? I was like, oh, okay. Yeah, that's great. Because at the time I was late for applying. This internship is like early spring, like you have to apply for it, but that one is already close to summer. And then he was like, yeah, you just do a rebrand project for Adobe Design. I was like, what is Adobe Design? So I spent the whole summer learn about Adobe Design, and that's how I know Adobe Design. I know I said a lot of Adobe Designs now, so, but yeah.
People will not forget, and that's great.
Yeah, remember Adobe Design. That's where you can find a lot of things about our org.
Yeah, absolutely. And as we start to come to a close, there are two more questions that I have. So our kind people that are keeping an eye on the Q&A chat pod, we are probably going to run 5 minutes into question time for these. I think my first question is, if you consider that first portfolio we were discussing and the portfolio that you entered Adobe Design with, I'd love to hear if there were particular differences to then and now. If you reflect on how you have sort of changed the most in that journey and maybe how that's represented in the portfolio, how would you describe that? And you don't have to describe it well. If you were just sort of forced to sort of say it roughly in a sentence, I'm really, really curious. And maybe we will start with Jocelyn. I'm going to pick on you because I know that you outed yourself for how long you've been working and the fact that you've touched a number of different sectors and spaces.
I knew that wasn't going to come back and bite me. So I would say yes in a short answer. So my values remain the same over the years, but my process is different. And my process is different mainly because I've gained enough experience to understand the context and the right principles to apply to my portfolio. And over the years, my definition on originality, and the reason why I'm calling that out is when I left school, being original was the thing to be. But I felt like my understanding of originality at the time was underdeveloped. I always felt as if I need to reinvent the wheel, but sometimes it's taking a wheel and putting it in a new light, just having a new perspective on existing materials. So through experience, I kind of gained that new understanding of what that is. And I just applied it to my portfolio. And as I said before, I now view my portfolio as a tool to get something, whether it's a job or a new client. So I applied the same principles from the other areas of my life, of design, and applied it to my portfolio. It's never separate. But in the earlier beginnings, I used to separate things because my portfolio was just to show my skill set. But I make that problem now a bit more interesting. A portfolio representing you. It should be an experience that captivates an audience rather than just displaying the work that you do.
Well, and maybe in that, if one of the themes of this discussion is this idea of the sort of portfolio being a little bit of a mirror onto your own sort of creative self-identity. I think it's great to hear you sort of say that difference between showing your skill set and actually the portfolio as a tool. And I think there's maybe some healthy challenge in this idea of, you know, to get something that you want with your portfolio, you have to know what you want, and that's hard. Dipali, how about you? Because I know that you arrived at Adobe pretty shortly after graduating and some internships that you've done. So how has your portfolio today changed compared to when you were first starting?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm actually at this 3-year inflection point right now where I've been thinking a lot about my portfolio, and I honestly have not updated it since I first got here. And now is that time where I'm like, now I have work that's coming out that's been confidential for a while. So now new stuff is out in the world that I can replace my student work with. I'm also, as a person, I've been getting a lot into writing about my work. And so I like want to flip my portfolio from something that's more visual to something that incorporates writing and something for that format. I guess I would just say that like a portfolio essentially is a living and breathing organism, just like you are. It's changing the way that you change every day, and you should let it. It's growing with you, and it's never really. So yeah, like the portfolio I'm about to put together in the next couple of months is going to be a reflection of who I am today, and that's probably going to evolve and change as we move, as I grow as well. So yeah, I don't have a great answer for you, but because I'm figuring it out right now, I'm trying to figure out who this person is and like what I like to say and what I like to show. Yeah.
Which I would argue makes that a great answer. There's authenticity to it, and thank you. Emma, how about you?
Yeah, I think I already mentioned a lot about, you know, for different jobs, and you can reorganize your portfolio in a certain way. But I do want to mention, like, there's one. Well, I forgot the professor's name. I feel so sorry, but I'm going to quote him. I remember when I was taking his class, he's like, remember, like, especially if you're hoping to find freelance clients, if you don't want to do something, don't put it in your portfolio. Because he actually really hated, I remember he said he hated to draw cars, but he's an illustrator. So he's like, yeah, I just want to show like I've done all sorts of work and all the spectrums, you know, I can draw anything. And then more clients would just come to him to draw cars. He's like, I hated drawing cars, but he spent, I think, 3 years drawing a lot of cars. He's like, then I'm done. Even though I want to show the amount of work I can do, but I just remove all of it because I just don't want to get clients ask me drawing cars anymore. So yeah, like think about, especially for freelancing, you don't have to put everything out there. You only have to put out those things that represent, of course, represent the quality of your work and also the things that you're interested in working on more. Then you will find projects that, you know, come to you that you also like. Just a neat tip.
Well, Emma, that is a perfect bridge into my final question, which is for all of us, which is, what is the best portfolio advice you've ever received that you still carry with you and even share with others? So Emma, you have answered. Well done. Why don't we go to Dipali next?
This is a hard question. I thought a lot about this. I think just honestly focus on your best work. It is best to show your best work first and then focus on quality over quantity. I know it might feel like you need to have so many and you need to show that you have done so much stuff. But at the end of the day, if you have 1 or 2 banging projects, I think that would take you, honestly, it'll just get you where you need to go.
Jocelyn, how about you?
So the first advice I ever received, not specifically to my portfolio, but just towards the way I work, was my first job in advertising. My boss looked at me and said, I should be like a sponge. And this advice kind of stuck with me. It gave me a new perspective on how to absorb and retain and reinterpret information, not just in my own surroundings, but through others' experiences. So, yeah.
Fantastic. Well, panelists, thank you for such an amazing discussion and for sharing so much of your amazing journeys and what you're up to a little bit now at Adobe Design as well. As we said and mentioned numerous times, if you go to adobe.design, you can go and find more about what our team is up to, the various job listings that we currently have open. And we also have our office hours session tomorrow. So if you want to come and chat with me, definitely, maybe some of the panelists face to face, come and bring your questions and discussion to that as well. And with that, let's invite back Li-Shon and some what I think are some amazing questions that have been appearing in the chat pod. So thank you to those that have been asking them.
Yeah, thanks everyone. We have about a half dozen questions or so. The first one is just a clarification. Folks have been talking about having a PDF deck or a website portfolio. Could you just clarify the difference between these and when you would use each one?
Great question. Does anyone have an answer? If not, I'm happy to jump in.
I can answer.
Go for it, Emma.
I can answer my version of that. The answer. So I personally prefer PDF. Well, because like I think especially when the people like who have like work experience, a lot of things are confidential. I don't know, like you have to have the agreement from, I don't know, people to put everything on your website. And I just think PDF is more, but can be more like personal and showcase your work. Even if I have everything on my website, I still have a PDF and I will send it to the recruiter. And also I will mention it to whoever is interviewing you, like I have this PDF, it has more, because I think a PDF is different. You can just show more process of your work instead of like make it an infinite scroll on your website. So yeah, that's my version of the answer.
And one thing I'll add as well is often when we get applicants to Adobe roles, often you'll receive like a list of, hey, here are some people you should check out. And often like the website, it can be the first place that you'll go. And so that being a kind of almost like a sort of welcome handshake or a hello, if we think about this idea of the portfolio kind of as a user-centered design or user experience exercise. And then often from there, if you start talking with someone, the PDF will arrive. And then if it moves to an in-person interview, the decks will open and you start looking at things in a lot more detail.
Thank you for clarifying. Oh, please, sorry.
Yeah,
we all have answers.
Just to add to that, it's important also to pay attention to the job post itself. Some recruiters will be very specific on how you should apply for the role. And the important thing is to be flexible to the actual role you're applying and gear your portfolio towards that specific role.
Yeah, and I would just add on the website front that a website, essentially a recruiter or hiring manager or a designer or anybody is essentially going to spend less than 5 minutes on your website. I can attest to this because I added Google Analytics to my website, and I can see that a page, like a project page, only has a 1 second view on it. So like they hop in, you just get a quick snippet, and then they're out. And so I would just think of that as like, as Archie mentioned, a handshake. So a firm one. Make sure you make it a good firm one.
Amazing. Thank you for the question.
So there's a question from Jane about portfolio presentation tips. If you have a print and digital portfolio and maybe there's no tech in the conference room where you're being interviewed, showing digital things on your own laptop can be very awkward. So do you have any tips for how you might do that?
I was once told, be prepared, especially if you're going on site. I remember going to an interview once where I think I had every dongle you could think of in my bag and the laptop and a printed version and a short printed version as well as a long printed version. You could tell I wanted the job. I didn't get it. But I don't know. What about others in the group?
I second that. Preparation is key for sure, especially coming from the old school into the new school. That was something that our professor always drilled to us, is that if your laptop isn't working or if your computer isn't working, make sure you can still present your work. So that's why there was more of a balance to push for something more tactile along with a digital experience, just in case one isn't working.
All right.
Sorry.
Oh yeah, Emma, did you have an answer too?
Well, I would just echo everybody and also add to it. I mean, if you have time, maybe prepare 1 or 2 jokes. So when things are loading, I know it works for me. It's not a design suggestion, but it works. So.
All right. This is a question for Dipali in particular from Dion. Dipali, when you were new grad applying for Adobe, was there anything that you did differently to prepare your portfolio for Adobe versus other companies you applied to?
It's a good question. And I also want to clarify, there's another question about what we mean by deck. I think my website was the same when I applied to all companies, because it's not really easy to change your website for everybody. But on the interview day, when I presented my portfolio through a deck, which is essentially the story that you're going to tell on the day of that you tap through. And that was essentially, I catered my projects and the things that I showed depending on the company. So I would research like who's going to be interviewing me, look at their background, see things that they work on, try to find things that I can connect with them on, so that we can have a conversation rather than just me presenting my work. And sort of think about like look at the work that you've done and sort of think about the different platforms, like for example, as an experience designer, you work on things that are like on mobile or on tablet or on desktop, showing like a variety of stuff. Like for Adobe, for example, a lot of the stuff that we do is on the web. So I showed work that is relevant to that rather than a company like Uber, for example, where all of their stuff is on a mobile phone. And so I would change up the work that I showed depending on who I was talking to. That helps.
To be really clear as well, I think deck in the sense of presentation, where you walk through the work or the story of a project.
There's a couple questions that are asking for advice for career changers in particular, or recent grads who don't necessarily have real world industry projects, but maybe just school projects or self-initiated work. Do you have any advice for folks like that?
I think it's great. Well, I mean, I think it's, to be honest, that we're all very jealous about new grads, because like when they talk about their portfolio, they're like, oh yeah, I have this great idea and I try all sorts of disciplines and, you know, like all different materials, and I get to this result. It's really inspiring. I always get really excited when I talk to like candidates who does not have work experience, because okay, sorry, I know I didn't want, this is not, it's okay. So with working experience is good, but like then when you know the game, and sometimes, you know, like you lose the spark of creativity. So first of all, I think you shouldn't shine about that. I think you should emphasize on like you were able to try out different means to achieve your goals and show how creative you are and the way how you think. Because I think a lot of companies, they're hiring new you know, fresh from school students. It's because they need fresh perspective. They need they can bring a lot of really interesting way of thinking and solving problems and solutions. So I would say like I will highlight that instead of like, oh, I want to hide that I don't have a lot of experience, but you do, like you actually experience a lot in school, like way much more, because a lot of things that we use right now at work, it's just like small portion of what we learned from school. But you actually have way much more to show. Well, I mean, I can show a lot of Brent work, yeah, using Adobe Illustrator, but outside of that, like I really don't have. I remember when I was a student, I can do letterpress. I can do like animations and make fonts. Like I don't have those projects anymore. So yeah, I would say don't shine about it. Like just don't be shy about, yeah. Let it shine. Okay.
Well, and I think it's really helpful to identify as well that it can be really hard to get hired for projects where you haven't proven that you've done that kind of work before. But I think something I've certainly experienced is when you know that there are certain types of spaces you want to be designing and problem solving in, you will find ways to design and problem solve in those spaces. And I know for me personally, AIGA was a really, really valuable space, both at a local and a national level, to actually sort of step into those types of problems and those types of spaces. So there is also our plug of go find your local AIGA community and keep coming to Portfolio Festival stuff this week. And you may keep finding stuff that you want to be working on and actually be able to.
Well, thank you for plugging AIGA and our community there, Archie. And thank you to all of our panelists, Jocelyn, DePauli, Emma, everybody who's tuned in here on Zoom and on the live streams. We had a handful of questions we couldn't get to today, but we'll email them to the Adobe Design folks, and they'll cover those and whatever new questions you have in their office hours tomorrow. So see you tomorrow for the Portfolio Festival festivities.
Looking forward to it. Thank you, everyone. And thank you, panelists.
Thank you, guys.
Everyone.